introduce our speaker today, Betty Duff, who is a very patient, flexible woman, let me tell you, because it's been maybe September, maybe not, how about October? But she stayed with us and she's going to make a presentation today. She was a research assistant to Rachel Carson when Rachel Carson was looking into pesticides. And as we all know, Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. So she helped gather information for it, and she enjoys talking about her time with Rachel. So with that, I will introduce Betty. Thank you. You think I'll need this?
No.
Pretty good.
Straighten that out.
Well, I started with Rachel Carson just as she was beginning to work on Silent Spring, but her hiring procedure, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Was interesting. The librarian I was in the interior department said that she had called in and wanted some people to, did he have anybody, student that would work on that? And since I was a student then, 20, between my junior and senior year in college, I leapt at the chance. So anyway, she said she started just an interview, a plain one, and that was over the phone. She said, I just have 2 questions. Are you a biology major? And then second, have you had organic chemistry? And since I had both of those, she said, okay, we'll come over to my home on Monday and we'll do some more talking. So I was just really struck when I got to her house because it's very ordinary, and I wasn't struck about that, but I was struck that she introduced me to her mother, who was in a hospital bed in Rachel's living room, and then she introduced me to Roger, who was her 5-year-old adopted son. And Roger was he was a sweet kid, but I could tell he was full of everything that would make it very hard to write a book. And he reminded me of a section of like the jump around at the Badger. So anyway, Rachel started off by talking about that she had decided to write, she'd signed a contract to write a book about pesticides. And I said, well, why? I mean, that wasn't real smart, but at that time, I thought that was kind of a dreary subject because Rachel had written The Sea Around Us before, and I was hoping we could do something with sea creatures. But Rachel said no. The reason I did it was all my friends kept writing me letters saying, you live in Washington, you can change things. You had a good book, you can do it. You've got to do this to help us all. And so she said, well, she almost didn't do it except that she got 2 notification of 2 of her friends who were really, had a really bad experience. One of them was a couple that lived in the Duxbury, Massachusetts area, and they had a bird sanctuary around their home in Duxbury, and their property had been sprayed repeatedly. Many songbirds were dead, and all their nesting places, ponds, and bird baths had been contaminated. And her friend said that as they walked around this refuge they had built up, the birds were dropping around them from the branches of trees. And when I said that to a group of high school people, they said, oh, that's really awful. And it was really awful. It's an image I've kept in my mind when I think about, what I'd like to do with scenes like that. And another friend who appealed to Rachel for help was Marjorie Spock, the sister of Benjamin Spock, the pediatrician. And she had her friend had a small farm on Long Island, and they were interested in practicing organic gardening and farming. And their farm was sprayed 4 times in a single day with DDT. Cows were contaminated and their soil on the farm was ruined. So they decided to take their case to the government and sue the government. And led by Robert Cushman Murphy, a prominent ornithologist, they sought a court order which was supposed to stop people from spraying. And their case went all the way to the Supreme Court. However, because of a technicality, the court would not hear it. However, Justice William Douglas wrote strong dissent against the Supreme Court's decision. And Douglas said that the perils of DDT underline the public importance of the case. Well, their urgent calls, Rachel's friends, for help reinforced the work Rachel had done as early as 1944. She was ready to take on, believe me, this pesticide case because she'd been watching those papers fly over her desk, you know, that said so many had died at the toxic bay, and she was ready. I think one thing as I've worked on this discussion, what's happened is I realized she's a real fighter. She's a fighter, and I hadn't seen that quite before. You know, I was more on the gentle, sweet old lady type, but this woman is a fighter, and I was really pleased about that. Anyway, she wrote an article about the dangers of DDT and sent it to the Reader's Digest, and they said, this was 1944, they said they could not print her article. It was too unpleasant and sad. Their readers liked happy topics. So anyway, Rachel, she said at the end of the interview with me, she said that I was hired and that I was to keep track of my time, and she paid $2 an hour, and I was thrilled. I was really thrilled. It was the beginning of something for me. So anyway, we had a comfortable routine. It's probably one before I forget, I'm only going to talk 20 minutes. That's already 12 off. So don't worry. And I've got all these pages, but that's just because I can't see. So, if I held them up, you could probably read them from the back.
Maybe you should join our group.
That's okay. So anyway, we had a comfortable routine. Rachel would give me a stack of 4x6 index cards with the references she wanted me to cover. And they were articles about the effects of DDT on land and were available, and people. And were available in many journals, particularly agriculture journals and journals of the chemical companies. And I sort of felt like when I was taking notes, I was really, getting the case going already because she had a lot of examples. If you've ever seen her bibliography in Silent Spring, it is really amazing. So anyway, she stressed accuracy, and I was to summarize the article and note anything else of importance. For example, did it refer to other studies? Did it agree or disagree with other findings? And at the end of the week, I would then return my 3 big notebook pages to her and receive another batch of references. Since that time, I've often thought of how different it would be to do that kind of research today. I mean, we could bring those articles up online in a database, and we could do comparisons, and then we could push print, and we'd have all of our articles right there. But then, for me, I would have missed all those wonderful wandering around libraries that I did that summer. And so anyway, some of the places do you think we could shut that tour? And,
Sure.
We're having enough problems today with getting it together here. Thank you so much. Anyway, some of the libraries I worked on that summer in Washington, D.C. were the Department of Agriculture and the National Agriculture Library in Beltsville and the Interior Department and Armed Forces Med Library in Falls Church and the National Library of Medicine in Bethesda. And I almost bet you that not only could we not see them, but those old libraries, but I bet you have to go through a lot because of all of the new, what do I want to say, controls, because of the
Security measures.
thank you, security measures. This is a game we're gonna play, you know, where I say sounds like. I just can't believe what happened when I passed 80 with my voice. It's just really very depressing. But anyway, I'm gonna make this through. We'll do fine. I didn't just work in libraries. I worked with Rachel in her study. And one afternoon, she was planning a presentation to her local community association, trying to persuade them not to spray her neighborhood. And she had a phone call from one of the men of the community who heard that she was planning to oppose the spraying. And he called her an alarmist. And when she began to cite evidence for her argument, he said to her in a very patronizing tone that she really mustn't believe everything she read in the newspapers. Well, we were sitting there, you know, with file cases all over, and books and letters, and she was furious. I began to see the real Rachel Carson coming out. But she was shrewd. She didn't just stop and scream and calling bad names, but she said, I knew what to do, and she wrote to her friend Dorothy. She said, I spoke to the association. It was a hot night, so I kept my remarks short. I just made the 3 points that I hit them hard. And the community association voted not to continue the spraying in the neighborhood. She was ecstatic. That was a big boost. I don't know what it was like in Wisconsin in 1958 when I'm talking about this. But DC, or where I live, big trucks would go up and down the street very slowly. Big, hoses, hosing everything down. Children, your sheets on the line, animals, and they thought that was what you should do. They were after the almighty mosquito. So I decided, since Rachel had such good luck with her community association, that I'd go to mine. Now listen, you know what happened there. Anyway, I decided I would bring up this, so they had a meeting, and unfortunately they were meeting other things too. But I spoke up and said maybe we should find out more about what was being sprayed everywhere and if it were safe. And the president of the neighborhood association said he was sure it was safe. The University of Maryland scientists had given us this spray, and they would never give us anything harmful. Well, of course they wouldn't intentionally give us anything harmful, but there was a good case here that somebody ought to know what the spray was. Well, this attitude, I went back and of course told Rachel, and she said, well, this expresses what he said was one of my great concerns in our society, Rachel said. That is the practice of people accepting others' opinions without checking the science behind their beliefs. She believed people were too trusting. And I could have added for my own what would occur to me. We're too lazy too. I mean, it's not easy, first of all, to find out what's in that spray. But I don't want you to know. So now I'm coming to the closing part, and I meant to say, stay after or whatever's convenient, wherever you do this. But you know, it's fun to talk to anybody about Rachel, but it's really fun to talk and listen to people who are as ardent conservationists as you are and have had your experience. In fact, I already have an offer for 3 Rachel stories over here. So I'm going to have one person. Well, so as time passed, I went back to school, and Rachel was working, doing more and more with gathering information for a book. And my mother kept hearing rumors that Rachel was not well. She was having illness. And it didn't surprise me that that could be true because Rachel once said she kept her illnesses quiet. She joked that if it were word of her illness was made public, it would bring too much comfort to the chemical company. So I want to end just with a sheet of what she called her catalog of illnesses. And I do this because it shows her courage and her determination to finish that book. 1960, Rachel was discovered had cancer, and she had a double mastectomy. She began radiation, suffered staph infections, phlebitis, unable to stand or walk. She worked in bed or in wheelchairs, and many days she could not work. Nausea was overpowering. By March 1961, the radiation treatments were over, and she was feeling better. And she began to walk and drive. And that little period she had in 1961 was time that she came to my wedding. I didn't remember that we'd invited her, but she came, and I was so touched. I didn't know about this illness or anything, but she was typical that way, that she was always thinking about other people in terms of what she could do, or when she didn't want to hurt them. And she had so much going on at that time, and for her to give that time up was very special. Anyway, in 1961, I was talking about she worked in bed. But her troubles were not over. That's what I was trying to say. In late 1961, new tumors were found, more radiation, extreme nausea, suffered inflammation of eyes, and could not read. That one got me. It made me trying to finish a book and not being able to read. She worked in bed in the mornings and then went to the hospital for radiation treatments in the afternoon. With her great determination and help from a secretary assistant, Jean Davis, who was very devoted, she finished her book in the spring of 1962, and she sent it to her publishers. The head editor of The New Yorker, was cooperating with Paul Brooks for Houghton Mifflin. And she said she sent out the manuscript, and when she received the phone call back from the editor of The New Yorker, that he thought the book was great, and he couldn't put it down. And they would be publishing excerpts very soon. She said that she put on Beethoven's violin concerto and went out and sat on her back porch. And she said the tears came at last of relief and of exhaustion. Well, she was not so exhausted that she didn't enjoy the response to her book, because she got kind of torn apart. And now I realized it, and I only realized it today because of the work I've been doing to get this stuff together, that she had a really fighting spirit, and she enjoyed conflict. You know, that was fun. She and Roger, her adopted son, would gather all these cartoons that were in the paper at the time, you know, making fun of Rachel Carson, and they kept them. She thought it probably helped him get through feeling that it was a bad thing. She said it was a good thing. And I have a couple I'll leave out here for you to look at. They're really pretty good. There's one I couldn't bring, but it's the one where the woman is she's dressed up like we used to dress up when we went shopping, you know? And she goes into the hardware store, and she says to the hardware man, she said, now I need some insecticide, pesticide. And she said, don't you try to sell me anything now that Rachel Carson would buy. So, I don't know. The other one, in case you don't get to see it, is the guy is leaning over the bar, you know, and the typical thing. And he said, getting the bartender to sympathize with him. And he says, what's that mean? He says, I finally made peace with the fallout. And now, here comes Rachel Carson. Anyway, there was a great deal of publicity. This is what she said, and she said that several times in those last months and days. She said that she was not trying to get rid of all chemicals, but she did want to provide a balance. There was a great deal of publicity about how wonderful pesticides were. She only wanted to balance the information, to know that there were dangers in their use as well. And something else was happening at that time when that book came out, because I think people were beginning to realize that Silent Spring, the book, was not really only about the danger of pesticides. It was also a warning about how we as people relate to our natural world. She shows a quote from E.B. White, the writer, and used it in the preface of her book. It goes like this: I am pessimistic about the human race because it is too ingenious for it's so good. Our approach to nature is to beat it into submission. We would stand a better chance of survival if we accommodated ourselves to this planet and viewed it appreciatively instead of skeptically and dictatorially. Rachel died April 14th, 1964. She was 58 years old. Thank you.